You finished pickling, freezing, and fermenting, and the kitchen table is still covered with carrots, beets, onions, and winter squash. The harvest keeps coming. That pile is not going to wait. I used to see a harvest like that and assume the answer was another freezer or more canning gear. That was the wrong frame. These are storage crops, and many of them can sit for months with very little processing, as long as the temperature and humidity are right. That is the whole trick. In this video, I'll show you 8 ways to keep that harvest going without building a root cellar or buying a canner. Some methods fit cool spaces better, others work best in dry air, so you can choose what matches your climate. And number 6 uses a clay pot to cool produce without electricity. The basic idea goes back about 4,500 years. Number 1. The Sandbox. Half a year of carrots from a bag of damp sand. You've probably thrown out a bag of carrots that went soft in the crisper drawer before you got to them. The crisper drawer is the weak link here. Carrots, beets, turnips, parsnips, rutabagas, all of them want the same thing, and it is not plastic and cold air. It is sand. Trim the tops down to about an inch. Do not wash them first. Water on the skin is what starts the rot, so brush the dirt off dry and leave it at that. Layer the roots in a wooden box or a plastic bin with a few inches of damp sand on the bottom. Use sand from a bag, not from the beach. Beach sand carries salt, and salt pulls moisture straight out of a root. Set the roots in so they do not touch each other, then cover with more sand. Check the box once a month and pull anything that has gone soft. Iowa State's storage guidance is why I stopped trusting a fridge for a bulk root harvest. Keep the box just above freezing, 32 to 40 degrees, with the sand holding 90 to 95% humidity. Your fridge cannot hold that kind of humidity. That damp sand can. Think of it as a buffer. It keeps moisture steady around every root while still letting a little air move through, so nothing dries out and nothing drowns. The first time I tried storing carrots, I left a full bag sitting on the kitchen counter, figuring I would deal with it later. 2 weeks in, they had gone soft and bent like rubber bands. I ended up tossing the whole bag. Do it right, and you are looking at 4 to 6 months in that box, versus the 5 months a bagged carrot might squeak out in your crisper, minus the shelf space it was eating the whole time. The real gap isn't the month count. It's the shelf space you get back. Half a year of carrots for the cost of a bag of sand. If your winters barely dip below 50 degrees, this method loses a lot of its punch. Pour it with a cool corner of the garage instead, or a spare fridge if you have got one. 1 box. A few inches of sand. Half a year of carrots. Number 2. Onion and garlic braids. Dry air beats the fridge every time. Onions and garlic want the exact opposite of what you just did with your carrots. That's the part nobody explains. Root crops want it cold and damp. Onions and garlic want it warm and bone dry, at least at first. Cure onions at 75 to 85 degrees until the necks and outer skins go completely dry and papery, no give left in them. Garlic cures at the same temperature but only needs 10 to 14 days. Once cured, braid the softneck varieties right at the stem. Or bundle hardneck bulbs with twine and hang them. Skip the sand here. Cure the bulbs first, then hang them somewhere dry, dark, and airy. If you've been storing onions in the fridge, that's actually shortening their life, not extending it. A fridge is cold and damp is exactly what rots the papery layer protecting the bulb underneath. Root vegetables need that 90% humidity to stay firm. Onions and garlic need the opposite, somewhere around 65 to 70%, or that outer skin turns to mush and takes the bulb with it. Wet rots them, dry keeps them. For onions and garlic, this is the one storage rule I tell every beginner to start with. Dry first, dry always. Cured right, onions hold anywhere from 3 to 8 months depending on the variety, and garlic runs 6 to 7 months, sometimes close to a year under ideal conditions. That is most of a year of onions and garlic hanging in a corner of your garage, costing you nothing but a length of string. One catch: hard-neck garlic will not braid. Bundle it with twine instead. Dry and dark beats cold and wet, every single time for these two. Number 3. Curing squash. 2 weeks in the sun buys 6 months in the pantry. Here's the part every squash growing guide buries in one sentence. And it's the entire difference between squash that rots in 3 weeks and squash that lasts until spring. You bring in a wheelbarrow of butternut squash in September, feeling proud. By Halloween, half of it has soft spots. The fix happens before the squash ever goes into storage. Cure it first. Set it somewhere warm, 80 to 85 degrees, with the air sitting around 50 to 70% humidity for 7 to 14 days. A dry porch works fine if the weather cooperates, or a garage floor if rain is in the forecast. After that window, move it somewhere cooler, 50 to 55 degrees, with decent airflow around each squash so no two are stacked skin to skin. One exception: skip curing acorn squash entirely. Curing actually shortens how long that variety keeps. During those 2 weeks in the warmth, the skin toughens up like a shell going on over the fruit, while the starch inside is quietly turning to sugar. That is your squash protecting itself and sweetening itself at the same time. Right there in your shed or on your back porch, whether you are watching it happen or not. Once you see that, the rest makes sense. Skip the cure, and you are storing a squash with soft skin and bland flesh on borrowed time from the day you set it down. Skip curing entirely, and an acorn squash or butternut can go soft in a matter of weeks. Even without curing, acorn squash still only holds 1 to 2 months, while a cured butternut stretches to 2 or 3 months, sometimes up to 6 under the right conditions. Hubbard and kabocha go the distance, holding 5 to 6 months in a cool, dry spot. Those are your long keepers. Keep the pile away from apples and pears while you're at it. The gas they give off speeds up spoilage in whatever squash is sitting nearby, cured or not. Acorn squash is the outlier here. Skip the curing step for this one, and use it early, within a month or 2, before the others even get started on their curing window. For Hubbard and kabocha, that is 5 to 6 months you are not paying a freezer to hold for you. 2 weeks in the sun now buys you 6 months in the pantry later. The next one deals with the tomatoes that never got a chance to turn red before frost, and it changes what wasted even means. Number 4. Green tomatoes not ripe yet is not the same as ruined. That pile of green tomatoes sitting on your counter before the first frost isn't a failed harvest. It's tomatoes on a delay. Pick the ones that are mature green, meaning they've hit full size but haven't started turning. Wipe them dry and lay them 1 or 2 layers deep in a cardboard box lined with newspaper, or wrap each one separately in newspaper if you've got the time. Set the box somewhere in the 55 to 70 degree range, out of the light. Check every few days and pull anything gone soft before it spreads to the rest. Check the box often. I used to think a counter full of green tomatoes before frost meant the season had beaten me, until I found out what 2 weeks in a dark box could do. A tomato does not need sunlight to ripen. It needs warmth and the ethylene gas it makes on its own. Wrapped in newspaper, in the dark, it keeps doing exactly what it would have done on the vine. At 70 degrees, expect ripe tomatoes in about 2 weeks. Drop to 55 degrees and that stretches closer to a month. Either way, you get fresh tomatoes weeks past the point your neighbors already cleared their vines. Gardeners who try this get real. Sliceable tomatoes running well into November, sometimes later. Your own counter can do the same thing with the pile already sitting there. Temperature is the limit here, below 50 degrees. The fruit may color up, but the flavor turns flat and watery. Stay above that line if taste matters to you. A cardboard box and yesterday's newspaper do this for free. Not ripe yet is not the same as ruined. Number 5. The garage cooler. the root cellar you already own. Everyone assumes you need an actual root cellar to store a real harvest. You don't. You need one insulated box in the right spot. An old cooler works. So does a wooden or plywood box lined with rigid foam insulation. Set it in an unheated garage or shed, somewhere that never sees a furnace or a space heater. Onions, garlic, and squash want dry air, so they go straight into a ventilated bin with nothing added. Root crops want humidity, so they go into the cooler with the damp sand from the Sandbox entry. Same setup, same rules. Drop a thermometer in there and check it. Before a hard cold snap rolls through, throw an old blanket or a few inches of straw over the top for extra insulation. This is the part every root cellar guide skips. You already own the box. A root cellar was never a special room built into a hillside. It is any space that holds a steady temperature near freezing, and an insulated garage does that job just fine if you set it up right. The target range is 32 to 50 degrees. Dip below 32 and you get cell damage, mushy roots, ruined texture. Climb above 50 and everything sprouts or rots faster than it should. You've got a cooler sitting empty in the garage right now from the last camping trip. That's not junk, that's a root cellar waiting to happen. Free storage, sitting right there the whole time. This setup works best where winters actually settle into that 35 to 50 degree range for a few months straight. If you're somewhere that barely dips near freezing, or somewhere that stays below zero for weeks on end, this is not your best option on its own. Test it first. Check your garage temperature for a week before you trust a single vegetable to it. An empty cooler in the garage is a root cellar that just hasn't been used yet. But the next one on this list doesn't use a cooler, doesn't use a fridge, and doesn't use a single watt of electricity. Number 6. The Zeer Pot, a 4,500-year-old clay trick that cools without power. If your porch turns into an oven every August with nowhere cool to set a basket of produce, this is the one to test. This one doesn't plug into anything. It doesn't need a fridge, a freezer, or a single watt of power. And it's roughly as old as the pyramids. Take 2 unglazed clay pots, different sizes, and set the smaller one inside the larger one. Fill the gap between them with damp sand. Lay a wet cloth over the top of the inner pot instead of a lid. Set the whole thing somewhere shaded with decent airflow, and pour water into that sand once or twice a day to keep it wet all the way through. What nobody mentions during a power outage is that people solved this problem long before anyone had a generator to plug in. The same trick that once cooled food for entire ancient civilizations still works in one clay pot sitting in a backyard today. Water moves out through the walls of the porous outer pot. As it evaporates, it pulls heat out of the inner pot right along with it. And whatever you've stored inside ends up sitting noticeably cooler than the air around it. No motor required. The technique goes back to ancient Egypt, somewhere around 2500 BC. It never fully disappeared, just faded out of daily use for a while. A Nigerian teacher named Mohammed Ba Abba revived it and patented a version in 1995, and the design went on to win the Rolex Award for Enterprise. Thousands of years between the first version and the last, and the physics never changed one bit. Expect the inside of that pot to run somewhere around 15 to 20 degrees cooler than the air outside it, as long as the air stays dry. Humid air slows the evaporation down, so this one lives and dies by climate. 2 small unglazed pots and a bag of sand will run you less than a trip to the garden center for a single bag of fertilizer. And old garden pots work fine if you've already got some sitting around collecting dust. Barely a cost at all. An old gardener I know lives out in the dry highlands of the Southwest. Showed me how to build one from 2 pots he picked up at the local garden store. He ran it every summer with nothing plugged in, nothing charged, nothing to break down. Just water, clay, and shade, season after season, for as long as I have known him. This one leans hard on climate. In the dry Southwest or high desert, it earns its keep fast. Somewhere humid, like the southeast or right along the coast. The evaporation slows down and the cooling effect drops off fast. Don't expect desert results if you're storing this on a porch in Georgia in August. Water does this on its own. It has for 4,500 years, no power bill required. If this level of detail on storing a harvest without building a root cellar or buying canning gear is what you've been looking for, subscribe and hit the bell. Every video, same level of specific. 2 methods left, and one of them came straight from someone who watched the last video and did something the 7 original fixes never covered. Number 7. Vacuum sealing. Pulling out the trapped air stops freezer burn cold. A viewer figured out something worth passing on. Freezer burn isn't about your freezer, it's about the air still trapped in the bag. A vacuum sealer pulls every bit of air out of the bag before it closes. That's the whole difference from a regular Ziploc. Use it on vegetables you've already blanched before freezing, or on produce you're only holding in the fridge for a few days. If you've ever pulled a bag of broccoli out of the freezer covered in ice crystals and freezer burn, that's not bad luck, that's trapped air. Freezer burn isn't spoiling in the bacterial sense. It's your food losing moisture straight into that trapped air, drying out from the inside while it sits there looking fine on the outside. Pull the air out, and that whole process stops before it starts. Blanched vegetables in a regular Ziploc bag hold up in the freezer for around 8 months. The same vegetables, vacuum sealed, last noticeably longer, well past that 8-month mark with good storage conditions. That gap adds up fast. A viewer told me once that no Ziploc bag ever came close to what vacuum sealing did for their frozen produce. After running both side by side for 3 winters straight. This one costs you something up front. A sealer isn't free. But it isn't canning gear, and it runs a lot cheaper than a full canning setup. Buy it once, use it on every vegetable you freeze for years to come. Vacuum sealing is a tighter freezer package with far less air left inside. One more to go, and it's the one sitting in your garden right now, doing absolutely nothing on purpose. Number 8. Dry beans and corn, the crop that stores itself if you leave it alone. Somewhere in your garden right now, there's a crop that stores itself for a year without you doing anything but leaving it alone. You've probably been picking it too early. Let bean and corn pods dry right on the plant until the shells go brittle and the seeds rattle around loose inside. Don't rush this part. If frost is coming before that happens, pull the whole plant, roots and all, and hang it upside down somewhere dry and airy, like a garage rafter or a covered porch, until it finishes drying completely. Once it's dry all the way through, shell the seeds out by hand, drop them into a sealed jar or airtight container, and set it somewhere cool, dark, and dry. That's the entire process, start to finish. What matters is how much moisture is still trapped in the seed, not whether it looks dry on the outside. A bean or a kernel of corn is still technically alive right up until its moisture content drops low enough. Once it hits that point, the seed basically shuts off its own biology. Nothing molds, nothing sprouts. The slow rot that usually creeps in from the inside never gets started. It's not doing anything at all, and that's exactly the point of the whole method. You get the best quality out of dry beans and corn in that first year on a dry, cool, dark shelf. Mark the jar with the harvest date. Stored properly, sealed up tight, and kept out of the light, they stay safe to eat well past that first year, even as texture and flavor slowly fade with time. Shake one dry pod before you shell the batch. If the seeds rattle loose and feel hard under your thumbnail, they are ready for the jar. If you're somewhere humid, drying outside gets tricky fast. You'll want an airy spot indoors, maybe a fan running steady, instead of counting on open air alone to finish the job. You already grew the shelf-stable food. You just have to let it finish. 8 ways to keep a harvest going without a root cellar, without a canner, without spending on gear you don't need. Roots went into sand. Bulbs went dry. Squash got a 2-week cure that bought it half a year. Even a clay pot older than written history, still doing its job in a garage in 2026. One rule ties every method on this list together, and it's the one people skip most. Never wash roots, bulbs, or squash before you store them this way, in sand, in a braid, or in a cool bin. Freezer storage is different, since those vegetables get washed and blanched first. Water on the skin is what starts the rot. Brush the dirt off dry. And wash right before you cook, not before you store. So here's what to do next. Tonight, before you do anything else, grab a cardboard box or a plastic bin. Pour 2 inches of damp sand in the bottom. Lay 1 layer of unwashed carrot or beets on top, not touching. Cover with more sand. Set it in the garage or the coolest corner of the house you've got. A cool corner of your garage can hold more of this harvest than it looks like.